In this chapter, we're going to take a first look at classes, and this will be our first real venture into object-oriented programming. Let's start out for a minute talking about what a class is. A very simple definition of a class is it's a user-defined type. A lot of times we'll say that a class is a definition of what's called an abstract data type, or an ADT. And to explain what an ADT is, we need to take a look at an example. So let's start a new program. We're going to call it name.rb. And so first let's look at what an abstract data type is. And this is not Ruby code, so I'm going to have to come back and comment all this out in just a minute. With an abstract data type, what we want to do is for any particular type of object that we want to model, we want to provide a way of defining the properties of that object and any behaviors that the object might own or display. So with that in mind, let's take a look at a more concrete example. And we'll write ADT name. So what can we define about a name? Well, we know that a name has a first name, a middle name, and a last name, at the very least. It might also have a prefix or a suffix, such as doctor or junior or the third, but we know that at the very least, a name has a first, middle, and last. We also know that there are certain things we can do with the name. For example, we can display a name first, middle, last, or we can display a name last, first, middle. And another thing we can also do is we can also display the initials of a name. So let's go back, and right here we can label this area as the properties. I'll capitalize that. Or attributes. That's another word you often hear associated with the properties of an abstract data type. And then we'll call these behaviors or operations. So once we've defined an object in terms of its abstract data type, the next step is to go ahead and define a class definition for that object. So before I do that, let me go ahead and comment out these lines so that we can use this file as executable Ruby code. So the way we define a class in Ruby is by using the keyword class followed by a name. In this case, the name is name, which is kind of confusing, but I think you can see the idea. After we've defined the name, the next step is usually to create what's called a initialization or an initialize method, also called a constructor in a lot of other languages. This is a method that always is named initialize. And what it does is it gives us the capability of assigning data to a class object. So in this particular example, we're just going to create our class with first, middle, and last. So those are going to be our three parameters. Then to assign those parameters to the pieces of data in our class, sometimes called fields or members or even class variables, although class variables is a term that I would probably not like to use. I would prefer field or member. After we've listed the parameters, the next step is to assign the parameters to the different properties of our class. After we've defined the parameters for the initialize method, the next step is to assign these to the different parts of the class that represent the properties. We're going to call those the members or the fields of the class. Our first field is first for the first name, and it's assigned the parameter first. Again, a little bit confusing, but not too bad. Next we have middle, and it's assigned the parameter middle. And finally we have last, and it's assigned the parameter last. So the field begins with an @ sign followed by the field name, and then we assign it one of the parameters. And that's really the primary purpose of our initialize method, so we can end it there. And then because that's all we want to do in this particular lesson, we'll end the class definition right there also. So what I'd like to do for the rest of this lesson is just demonstrate how to create what are called instance objects or instance variables of this class. So in a main program, we would write something like a name is equal to name dot new like so. The keyword new will call the initialize method or the constructor for the class, and then assign each argument to the corresponding field or member. So for the a name object, the first name is going to be Jane, the middle name is going to be Elizabeth, and the last name is going to be Brown. We can see that using a built-in method called inspect. Let's take a look at that. We'll save our program. So when we call inspect, it gives us an internal name for the object, a name. Then we have the first name is Jane, the middle name is Elizabeth, and the last name is Brown. Now, there are better ways to return the values for each of the members, which we'll call the state of the object. And there's better ways to do it than just using inspect. And the best way to do it is using something called a toString method. And we're going to look at that and other aspects of creating classes in the next lesson.